people have such emotional, strong opinions on whether Trump is right or Trump is wrong. And it seems like less and less people are willing to say, I don't know. Let's talk about tariffs, a topic that you might not consider a Stoic one. And the truth about everything in terms of philosophy is that everything is really philosophy, including things like tariffs. So we can look at tariffs through a Stoic lens and consider it from, I guess, a few different perspectives. What I want to do is I want to look at this idea of tariffs because I'm Canadian, I admit it, but I have American friends. I lived in America. I've also been down to Mexico, so I've been all around North America. Obviously, we're one people, but this idea of tariffs is an interesting one because if you go back to where, let's say, we were as a North American continent, we did have like the North American Free Trade Agreement, which in sum is an agreement for us to have free trade amongst Mexico, Canada, and the US. And then that got changed. It got changed. And then eventually we got Trump back in office in the US, and he's bringing up this idea of tariffs. And I want to touch on this because it's a very interesting concept. The idea is that you charge another country money to trade. If they want to trade with you, you charge them extra money. So it's harder for there to be trade across country borders. Now, in Canada, pretty much everyone's freaking out about this. They think this is Trump being too harsh and he's not being a friend to Canada. And then you see some Americans who feel the same, and a lot of Americans feel like, no, actually, Trump is doing what's best for the country. And so this raises some very interesting points because the Stoics say, obviously, that we're all part of a cosmopolitan, but they also have this idea of the circles of concern. And the circles of concern, if we start at the smallest circle, which is ourselves, we do have a responsibility to take care of ourselves. And then if you go a circle bigger, you'll find that we have a responsibility to take care of our family. And if you go with a little circle bigger, you'll find that we have a responsibility to take care of our community, our province, our state, and eventually our country. And if you keep going, you'll find the cosmos as a whole. So maybe there's a circle of Canada, there's a circle of the USA, and then there's the bigger circle of North America, and then there's the bigger circle of the Earth. There's literally an infinite number of circles that you can consider, but there are some real practical ones, and Canada, the US, North America are some reasonable ones. And so the idea of the circles of concern is kind of simple, but it's also really complicated, like many Stoic principles when you apply it in practice. The idea is that you want to take care of yourself before you take care of someone else. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a selfish person. What it means is that if you are going to show up to the world in such a way that is actually beneficial to the world, you got to have your shit together first. That's what that means. So there's really no point in you starting, let's say, a new family if you can't even support yourself in some way, if you're not self-sustaining. There's no point. There's no point for you to go out and help the community if your finances are in such a place that you can't even pay your own bills right now. You're working all the time, but you still can't make ends meet. In sum, you have to make sure that your basic needs are met before you expand your circles of concern. Now, that's simple enough, right? Take care of yourself, make sure you're okay before you take care of others. However, the complicated part of that is that when is enough enough? Because we know that you're never going to be perfect. We know that you're never going to fully have your shit together. So does that mean you just never move on to the next circle? You never start a family? Doesn't mean you never help your community. Well, of course, it doesn't mean that. That would be ridiculous. So there's a bit of discretion here. And I think it's something like if you are okay, then you go on to the next circle of concern. And I know that's very arbitrary. But if you just think about what that means, if you are okay. So if you ask someone, hey, are you okay? Like, are you okay? And you really mean that question, and they'll tell you, well, listen, I'm struggling a little bit at home. I'm having trouble paying rent. I'm having trouble losing weight. I can't get into the gym. Like, I'm struggling a little bit. And I can ask you right now, dear listener, are you okay? And if you think about that, you'll probably get yourself a reasonable answer. So I feel like I am okay. And so I feel like in terms of helping family, I think I can do that. In terms of helping the people at work, I think I can do that. Helping the community out a little bit. I can give some of my time to help other people because I have myself in such a situation where I feel capable to do that. I'm okay. If your family's okay, maybe your family can go on and help the community, and so on. So I know that's arbitrary. I know it's sort of subjective. Are you okay? But I think it's close enough for this idea of circles of concern because, again, you're never going to be perfectly okay. If I were to ask you, is your life perfect? No one's going to say yes to that. Everyone's going to say, there's some things that I could brush up on. Am I okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I got my shit in order. But I'm not perfect by no means. And so that's a good rule of thumb. Now, let's talk about tariffs. Tariffs, in my opinion, is a really strong example of how the circles of concern are applicable. You have the US who feel, like many countries post-COVID, that there's no self-sustainability within the country. I mean, in Canada and the US, we have found throughout COVID and afterwards that a lot of our medical supplies comes from China. And so that puts us in a vulnerable position because for us to maintain ourselves, we have to rely on someone else. And so you could make the case that Canada, the US, we are not okay right now. You could make that case. Now, is that the right case to make? I don't know. Trump thinks it is the case to make. Trump apparently thinks that, no, we need to be self-sustaining. We are not okay right now. Hey there. Let me thank you for being a listener to this ad-free podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, there are a few things you can do to help me out. A 5-star review on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this really does help, and it's free. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter or Patreon. Substack free gets each episode emailed to you along with the transcript in the form of an article. You'll also get access to my live talks, followed by a Q&A afterward. Substack Premium supporters and my patrons on Patreon get access to the recordings and a brief article of those Q&A sessions, access to full episodes of the Paradoxically Speaking podcast, my Steps to Success interview series, Stoic meditations, and much more. Links to Substack and Patreon can be found in the show notes. So a tariff is not an attack against another country. A tariff is a way to make a country more self-sustaining. Think about it in terms of your own personal life, your own example here. If I were to make it, let's say, difficult for you as an individual to rely on someone else, you just might be more self-sustaining. Meaning, if you're living at home with your parents right now, and let's say you're an adult, let's say you probably should be moving out, but you're not. That's your choice, but let's say you're not. It might be hard for you to be self-sustaining because you're relying on other people. Now, if I remove you from that family and I say, okay, your parents are going to go and live their own life, you are going to go live your own life and be self sustaining, that's going to require you to improve and be self sustaining. And so that's what tariffs are trying to do. It's let's keep business within the country. Now, here's where it gets tangly again, this idea of how do we actually implement this Stoic circles of concern idea? Because you could make the argument, and this is where I suppose Canadians are coming from, that, well, shouldn't we be in your circles of concern? Now, shouldn't the US care about Canada just as much because we're in the same circle? And the answer is yes, they should, as long as they are okay. Again, the subjectivity of this, the arbitrariness, like, I get that. And this is why this idea of tariffs is so contested. This is why there's so much conflict of ideas about this. This is why some people are upset, some people are not. Because what that means changes because it's a subjective thing in many ways. There's objective realities, right? Yeah, you can look at the numbers and you can look at the exports and the imports between Canada and US, and you can do some math and you can get some facts down on paper. But at the end of the day, Trump came into power and he said, the US is not okay where it is right now. We're relying way too much on trade. It's negatively affecting us. We need to be okay first. And then maybe we can talk about something after. And so, am I pro tariff? Am I anti tariff? I'm not either. Like, I haven't really put enough thought into it or research into the details to really have an opinion. I'm going to play the humility card on this one. What I do know is that it's not wrong. If we take the Stoic circles of concern, it's not wrong for you as an individual, as a community, as a family, as a country. It's not wrong for you to make yourself okay before you go on and help other people. Because you cannot do that to your full potential unless you are okay. So from the Canadian perspective, they're looking at the US and they're saying, well, you just want to tax us. You want to affect our economy and you want to make things more difficult for us. But the US is saying, well, maybe, certainly Trump is saying, maybe the US is not getting such a great deal here. Maybe we need to be self-sustaining first. And then maybe once we do that, that'll make us in a better situation or in a better state of readiness to help out other people. So the US is a circle of concern. The country of Canada is a circle of concern, and North America is a circle of concern, and planet Earth is a circle of concern. And so which one do you focus on? Well, it's the one that you are able to, while not losing the inner circles of concern. Because you can be the US, and let's say as opposed to having tariffs, let's say they do the opposite. We will give Canadians benefits on trading with us. We will give them money if they trade with us. Great, great trade deals. Well, eventually the country is going to collapse. Eventually the US economy is going to collapse because no one can be entirely, purely generous. You can't be. That's why generosity is not a cardinal virtue. You have to pair it with wisdom. You have to pair it with temperance. You cannot just give away everything you own, everything you have, because you're not going to be okay. And if you're not okay, there's no way for the outer circles to benefit from you. So I'm not pro. I'm not against. If I had a detailed, nuanced, let's say, researched opinion on it, I would have an opinion, but I really don't. But I do know that tariffs are not necessarily a bad thing. It's an indifferent, just like anything else. Now, let me talk to end this off with what you can do, because there's a lot of anxiety and stress about these tariffs now. And so let's analyze it through circles of concern and the dichotomy of control. At the end of the day, man, you cannot change what Trump does or what Justin Trudeau does. For my American listeners, that's the Prime Minister of Canada. Not the President, the Prime Minister. So you have no control over that. Now, you can protest. You have the right to protest if you want, but there's not much you can really do. If you're a business owner, there's not a whole lot you can really do. You just have to work with what you're given. So if you're a business owner, maybe you look at different business opportunities. Maybe you tighten up your budget. Maybe you have to let yourself or let one of your employees go for a little bit. Maybe you have to lay some people off because, again, you have to take care of your inner circle of concern. And sometimes you have to trim the fat a little bit to make it by. It's a very harsh reality. But ultimately, you can tighten up your budget to make sure that financial burdens are less likely to occur. You might have to tighten up your business plan or change. You might have to pivot. In your family, you might have to do the same thing. Tighten up your budgets. Maybe let some things go. Maybe move. I mean, that's an option. You can always try and relocate, change countries, get a new job, get a better job, move to a place where there's less taxes. There's lots of ways that you can pivot. As a country, this is not really up to us, except for the fact that, I mean, you can vote. We have the right to vote. You can send letters to your parliament. There's all these things that you can do. But ultimately, you have to accept that if you're not a politician, you can suggest and you can vote, and that's your role to play. But ultimately, when it comes to country versus country, there's not a whole lot that's up to you also. As a North American, what can you do? Not as a Canadian, not as an American, but what about as a North American? You be kind to each other. That would be a great start. Why don't we try not to alienate each other? Why don't we try not to fight with each other? Our American friends, our Mexican friends. Why don't we try and maintain friendliness, kindness between us? That's well within our rights. Ultimately, things, I think, are a lot more complicated than we give them credit for. I know I say that a lot, it's complicated. The reason I say that is because it is. This idea of like tariffs, people have such emotional, strong opinions on whether Trump is right or Trump is wrong. And it seems like less and less people are willing to say, I don't know. I really don't know what this means. I know what it does to me emotionally. I know that it might affect me. It might make me feel a little anxious or stressed about the economy, about my financial situation, sure. But I really don't know if this is a right thing or a good thing or a bad thing or anything. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have time, do the research, but also be humble enough to accept that there's much in life that you just don't know. And you can say that. When someone asks you, hey, what do you think about Trump's tariffs? You can say, I really don't know. So don't get too stressed about the tariffs. Listen, man, life goes on. I can't see anything too bad coming between Canada and the US. Listen, we're close allies, very close allies. We've been that way for years. Is America in our circle of concern as Canadians? Yes, of course. Are they in the closest circle of concern as Canadians? No, probably not, but neither are Canadians for Americans. So it's okay. We can take care of ourselves before we take care of others as long as, again, we maintain that balance. Ultimately, remember, as the everyday Stoic does, that there's things that are up to you and things that are not up to you. And always keep that distinction in mind.